thank you.
Okay. Well, yes, good afternoon now. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about Middlemarch's Community Land Trust. I'll give a little bit of background to Middlemarch's CLT and talk a little bit about what we do, and in particular, acquiring and managing land for conservation. Then I'll hand over to Janet, who, as you can see, will talk about Middlemarch's Community Land Trust cooperation with or collaboration with town and parish councils and with the Shropshire Association of Local Councils. Okay, so if you have the next slide, please, Graham. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with community land trusts, and the vast majority of them are concerned with the provision of affordable housing. So we have an example there from Eastington CLT, where they were building some affordable homes for their local residents. And then there are other community land trusts who have roles such as safeguarding assets like community enterprises, food growing such as community orchards, or managing workspaces for small local businesses. And then others might manage commons, village greens, and other public space. But Middlemarch is different from these. So if we have the next slide, please. Yes, we differ in that the Middlemarch's Community CLT, its primary concern is managing land for biodiversity. That may mean purchase of the land, but we're also willing to manage land which is in private or in public ownership. As an example of that, we've recently signed a memorandum of understanding with a private individual who owns a sizable area of woodland in Shropshire, and the CLT will manage it on his behalf, or at least direct the management. We won't be physically engaged with the management ourselves, but we will direct the management in consultation with the owner. So Middlemarch's was launched in April 2019, and a little bit later that year was constituted as a community benefit society. And we were very pleased when we won the Community Land Trust Networks award. It's called What a Wonderful World Award. We won that in 2024. Okay, so next slide, please. So you might be asking, why is it necessary for a community land trust to be formed to acquire or manage land for conservation when there are so many other organisations which can do that? And listed some of them there: Natural England, or because we operate across the border into Wales, we're also involved with Natural Resources Wales, and the many charities which own land and manage it for conservation. So the National Trust, the Wildlife Trust, RSPB, and so on, and Woodland Trust. You can go on for quite some time listing the organisations which own land and manage it for conservation. So why did we feel that yet another organisation was needed? Well, we thought that there were a number of sites which were coming onto the market which are probably too small to be or currently lacking value for biodiversity to be of interest to those other organisations. And certainly in this area, some of those organisations seem more reluctant to acquire land now unless they can see potential for much larger schemes than they used to be involved with. So perhaps rewilding schemes or managing for biodiversity net gain or for carbon offsetting and so on. And we were concerned that there were a number of sites which were being lost as a consequence. And these might be, as I say, relatively small or perhaps lacking biodiversity. And our original intention was that we would be acquiring those sites and improving them from the point of view of biodiversity to increase their biodiversity. Now, having said that, this changed a little bit in that the last two sites that we've acquired are sites of special scientific interest, SSSIs as they're often referred to. So these are sites then which already are recognised for their biodiversity value, but they came onto the market and there was a danger that they might have been sold to owners who might not manage them as well as they should be. I mean, they're under a legal obligation to manage them appropriately, but it may not always be the case. Particularly, neglect can be a way in which those sites can lose their value. And certainly in one case, the owners of the site were quite, if you like, relieved because they had a bungalow they wanted to sell with the attached SSSI that they had managed for 25 years or thereabouts. And it was difficult for them to sell the building with that constraint. People were willing to buy the bungalow and the land if they could have it as a horse paddock, for example, but that wasn't appropriate and in that case wouldn't be allowed by Natural Resources Wales. So they were sort of a little bit stuck and we were able to come in and acquire the land, leaving them to sell their bungalow separately. So it's not always that we buy land with relatively poor biodiversity and improve it. Now we're sort of acquiring sites with some value already, but hoping to maintain and still, if we can, enhance that. So the vision there, Middle Marches Community Land Trust is a vision for an ecologically rich and resilient landscape across the Middle Marches, supporting you can read it, supporting work in partnership with local communities and landowners, both large and small, and inspires residents and visitors alike. We define the Middle Marches in this case as certainly all of Shropshire, parts of the neighbouring parts of Paris. Obviously, Paris is a very large Welsh county, and we can't cover it all, but the neighbouring parts, and also we would say if a site came up in North Herefordshire, we would look at that seriously. So we currently own 5 sites and are in the process of acquiring a 6th. One of those, the ones I've just described, the bungalow and the SSSI, is just over the border into Paris, only by a few hundred meters, but nonetheless, it becomes then that we, as I said, talk with Natural Resources Wales rather than with Natural England. So we have to be aware of those. Okay, so we have the next slide. Well, I should say perhaps that the CLT then acquires and manages land for nature recovery. It works with, well, I think we've covered this, works with large and small landowners, farmers and occupiers, and it works with other excuse me. It works with other organisations, communities and individuals, and we can act as an advice hub. And I think Janet will say more about at least some of those collaborations. So our sources of income, we have shareholders. Minimum shareholding is £50. The maximum is 100,000. That's very much a theoretical maximum. We've not got any shareholders who have got anywhere near £100,000, but in theory they could do. It doesn't matter the size of the shareholding, they all get one vote at the AGM. But we've been very reliant to acquire several of these sites on donations, public appeals, and they've been greatly enhanced by the fact that because of our status, we were able to claim gift aid on those donations. And that makes a huge difference. It really does sort of top up the amount of money that we get directly from donations and makes it a little easier to acquire these sites through public appeal. There is, of course, a slight danger. We're operating in a relatively small area, and it may be that in some time in the future, people will get fed up with giving us money to acquire land. But so far, they've been very good, and some of the appeals have been quite spectacular, really, particularly in places like Church Stretton. We've also acquired then some grants. There's a project operating in this area called Stepping Stones. This is through the National Trust, and indirectly then it's Heritage Lottery funding, which includes funding for lots of local organisations, of which Middlemarches Community Land Trust has been one. So we've benefited from that wider project of the Stepping Stones. Part of our area is in the Shropshire Hills National Landscape, and within that there is a Shropshire Hills Landscape Trust, which has provided us with funding to manage, more especially to manage some of our sites, or to help towards the management. And again, we've had money from the National Heritage Lottery Fund for one of our sites called Meadows, which is one of the more recent acquisitions. That's one of the SSSIs that we've acquired, but in that case, it's within England. Once we've acquired some of these sites, then we can maybe offer grazing licenses. Often the management of these sites requires grazing, so we can obtain some income by leasing out that grazing. We don't own animals ourselves, but we can liaise with local farmers and graziers. The initials on the slide there, NH is Norbury Hill, HL is High Lessos, and MM is Minsterley Meadows. That we haven't yet set up a grazing license with Minsterley Meadows, but we hope we will. For two sites, Norbury Hill and Minsterley Meadows, we can also obtain countryside stewardship funding. So we've acquired or agreed to manage them according to countryside stewardship prescriptions. And then largely through Janet, almost entirely through Janet, who has organised lots of conferences mainly for local organisations, but through Middlemarches Community Land Trust. And that's generated income which goes into a fund which enables Janet to organise future conferences. So they've gone, which she might say more about this, but they've gone from very local topics and now into things like the National Meadows Conference. She's organised 3 of those, and with the prospect of several more in future years. So that's been a huge benefit for Middlemarches Community Trust, but also our ability to liaise with others. So I think, having mentioned Janet and her conference, is probably the best time for me to pass over to her and let her talk about some of those collaborations, not only in terms of conferences, but other aspects of the CLT's work.
We have one person who is going to leave, Richard. I just wanted to check whether he wanted to ask any questions before that happened.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying desperately to remember who it was. Wasn't you, John, was it?
It's me, yes.
It was you, okay. Did you have any questions you wanted to check with Richard before you need to run away?
Yes, it's really interesting because I own woodland in the Forest of Dean, which is probably a bit further south than your area, but very close
Yeah.
to the border. And the thought of actually having somebody help manage these uh, natural colonization grants would be very attractive, particularly as I want to encourage the rare temperate rainforest in the Forest of Dean, this area, particular area, to
Mhm.
move into now, which is very rough woodland.
Right. Yeah, we're certainly, we're able to advise. I mean, as you say, or you're probably a bit too far south for us to get physically involved again. But certainly, I think we would be willing to offer advice on what might be possible
Mm.
and perhaps how the site should be managed if you needed that. By the sound of it, you've probably got a good idea of what's necessary anyway.
Yes, and can we make contact with CLTs in areas outside yours quite easily, and are they generally
Yeah.
quite all up to a standard? And
Yes, there is the National Association of Community Land Trusts, which well, you can look at the website and find local CLTs. I should have emphasised perhaps at the beginning that, as I said, other CLTs are mainly involved with other aspects. As far as I'm aware, we're the only CLT in England that focuses on nature conservation.
mm,
It's more common in Scotland, where land has been acquired for that purpose and is owned by the equivalent of CLTs in Scotland. But what I'm saying is you might not find your local CLT is particularly experienced in conservation management.
thank you very much. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Well done, Richard, thank you. And let's pass on to Janet now. I'll share the screen with your slides, Janet.
Okay, thank you. So, Graham, I'll follow up this call with the website for the National Network of Community Land Trusts. Okay, so I'm Janet Cobb and I'm on the board with Richard of the Middle Marches Community Land Trust. And I think Richard touched on this. Why is Middle Marches Community Land Trust needed? Well, there's a loss of connectivity within our landscape. So we're ending up with sort of mini nature reserves dotted across the country, and there's no connectivity between them. So we know we've got wildlife in crisis. So we're the most nature depleted country in Europe and maybe in the world, I don't know. And we've also been faced with climate change pressures, and that's become all too obvious in the last couple of weeks with the wildfires in France and Spain in particular, and it's becoming increasingly frightening in terms of nature and the destruction to nature. We're also likely to experience food and energy supplies vulnerabilities as climate change takes hold. And we are looking at food production. I think the yields are down something like 60% across Europe this year. So we need to start thinking about resilience. And town and parish council networks are one of the key networks where we can think about developing resilience in communities. There needs to be a future for agriculture and forestry in the UK, and we're interested in trying to build that resilience and that community action from a community land trust point of view. So a bottom-up approach, not just waiting for government. We're interested in supporting resilient communities and economies, and one of the fantastic things about community land trusts is that they move assets to community ownership, and they also create circular economies for local communities. So whether it's nature or housing or food production, all those things create a circular economy for the community that owns the asset. So we're almost shifting the power away from politicians and the higher echelons back to people. We're interested in strategic land acquisition for nature across the Middle Marches. And as Richard said, we started out with that ambition, and then what happened was these SSSI sites came up for sale, and we jumped in to try and salvage those because nobody else was particularly interested because they were too small. And we're not here to duplicate those big organisations. We sit in the middle of them between communities and the big organisations. So we're operating at very much at a community level, and a lot of networking and talking to the public comes into our work. Our work with the Community Land Trust. So next slide, please, Graham. So Middle Marches Community Land Trust land holdings are Cudwell Meadow, which is a tiny wetland meadow in Church Stretton, and it was our first acquisition. A lot of work has gone on there in terms of habitat restoration and collecting the data. So insect populations and mammal populations, all that sort of work's going on. So we can prove that the ownership by the community has resulted in an increase in biodiversity. Norbury Hill is a big stepping stone in between two national landscape features, which is the Long Mynd, which is owned by the National Trust, and Stiperstones National Nature Reserve. And we've provided now the big stepping stone in between in terms of the hill. And again, a lot of work's gone on in Norbury Hill. One of the projects is to reintroduce the small pearl-bordered fritillary butterfly by doing specific planting of marsh violets. Richard, jump in if I get any of these facts wrong.
No, you're fine.
High Leasos is 3 fields again in Church Stretton, and that was an extraordinary campaign because we had 2 really dedicated people on the ground who managed to raise, and hold your breath for this, 400,000 in 10 days to buy 3 fields from that particular community. A lot of community interest and lots of people already using those fields. So there was already a lot of public engagement, and it just needed somebody to step into that space. Minsterley Meadows, SSSI was a bit different. Over 50,000 green-winged orchids on 2 fields in Minsterley. Minsterley is not a particularly wealthy population. So we managed to, how we did that was we managed to get to £100,000 in pledges from the public. And once we'd got £100,000 in pledges, we could then match fund those pledges with a Heritage Lottery grant. So we managed to get £224,000 lottery grant. And in the end, we managed to collect 157,000 money in cash. So we now are able to employ a project coordinator, and then that's spilled out into all sorts of interesting things, like running forest school sessions for children who are not in mainstream schools, and working with a local primary school. So again, it's spilling out into the local community. And because we've got additional funding from Minsterley Meadows, we've now been able to create a parish cluster. So 3 parishes working together, Minsterley, Pontesbury and Hanwood, working together to create a parish cluster and green corridors between that particular site and other sites in those parishes. And then the final one was White Grit SSSI, and that was a tiny little 3 fields again, but our first step into Wales through into Powys. And then very excitingly, Richard mentioned Oaks Wood, which was a new development. Instead of purchasing land, working with the current landowner. And that woodland butts right up to the Stiperstones National Nature Reserve. And by the way, we're the first community land trust to own any land in a National Nature Reserve. but it abuts right up to the National Nature Reserve, and it's the last remaining 200-acre linear woodland in Shropshire. So potentially a very, very important site in terms of nature recovery and linkage. So next slide, please. So almost all the land has been bought with public donations, and as Richard mentioned, we're able to claim 25% funding back from the Treasury, which again boosts the amount of money fantastically that we are able to collect. The hassle for that is you need a gift aid form for every donor, and that sort of takes up a lot of admin staff chasing people for gift aid forms and so on and so forth. But it's very important for us in terms of collecting funding. And public and community engagement has been one of MMCLT's strengths, and we've been engaged since, well, we lost a year through COVID, but subsequently running conferences and small events. So I think we've run, at the last count, 16 conferences for various on various topics around nature, anything from woodland to hedges, verges, ditches. And we've also started to target some of those conferences at town and parish councils and town and parish councillors. So we're up, this year will be our 4th and 5th conference aimed at town and parish councillors. And we also have organised public engagement events on particular sites, so walks on our sites, but other things like visits to wildflower nurseries or to agri-woodland sites. So a whole range of community engagement events, walks, talks, and work with children. And we're actively collaborating with colleagues on the ground, such as March's Meadow Group have become a key collaborator. Stepping Stones Project, Caring for God's Acre, who are a national organisation working with churchyards, trying to increase nature in churchyards, and CPRE, who are here running a Hedgerow Heroes project, replanting hedgerows across the whole of Shropshire, and that's led to much closer cooperation and working with the farming network. Those are just pictures from 2 of our conferences, and the one on the left was the launch event for Minsterley Meadows, and it was standing room only. So we organised this event. The Minsterley Meadows came up for site up for sale just before Christmas. And our hearts sank because Christmas and New Year, we're thinking, how are we going to, get this off the ground? So we organised a conference which took place, a meeting which took place on January the 6th, 2025. We were expecting maybe 20, 30 people, and over 100 people turned up. And we walked away from that meeting with £12,000 in pledges straight away. So we were testing public interest, and we came away with a thumbs up, and eventually took us 11 months, but eventually we bought the meadows. So next slide, please. So these are some of the extra initiatives that we've taken. So we've been actively working with SALC, which is Shropshire Association of Local Councils, and alongside that, we've been working with Exeter University, and Exeter University wrote a British Academy paper, which is, as you can see, pioneering place-sensitive nature recovery at hyperlocal scale. And that is about our work with town and parish councils and how it got started. So Graham's got the link to that, and I think he's going to share it after this event. We've also set up March's Artists for Nature. So we've got a group of artists who are helping us with conferences and producing artwork. And the agreement is that if they sell some artwork, they will give us 10% of the proceeds, which will go into our Nature Recovery Fund. It's not just the money. It's about connecting with people, new audiences who have not previously been engaged with nature recovery work. And This year we ran our third National Meadows Conference at Kew, Wakehurst, and that's all been filmed. And again, it's sort of promoted the work of the Community Land Trust and work with town and parish councils. There was a lot of interest at the Kew conference. 200 people came. A lot of interest in working with town and parish councils on nature recovery. And we've also started work with schools and hoping to roll out across the town and parish council in Shropshire all the work that we've done with schools on Minsterley Meadows. So we've developed a teaching pack and we've got lots of experience now of working with children. So next slide, please. So as I say, we've been working for a long time with the local council network. There are 180 town and parish councils across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and the lead chap called the lead officer for SALC is Chris Mellings, and he's been extremely helpful in terms of engaging with town and parish councils. So if you've got a lead officer in your area, that would be somebody I would talk to straight away about nature recovery in town and parish councils. So as everybody probably knows, we've got local nature recovery strategies across the whole of England now, and we've got a legal responsibility to implement those strategies. And some legal responsibilities are falling on town and parish councils. And again, we've been doing some work on that, which we're quite happy to share with other people if they're interested. Okay, next slide. So we've had 4 conferences aimed at parish councillors so far, and Natalie Bennett, who was the ex-Green Party leader, but she's also the vice chair of the National Association of Local Councils. And she very helpfully has been to Shropshire twice to speak at 2 of our conferences. And because she's the vice chair of NALC, that's a really useful connection back into the National Association of Local Councils. We've also been working with the local nature recovery strategy and developed a workbook for town and parish councils, and that's available on our website as a downloadable PDF. It's simple things that town and parish councils can do, and again, I think Graham's got the link to that, and we can share that after this session. It's not rocket science, but it is based on our local nature recovery strategy. It's simple things like develop ponds, tree planting, hedge restoration, verge restoration. And again, there's lots of help available if people want to pick that up. And we're all working to the 30 by 30, which is an international, you probably already all know this, an international agreement to return 30% of our land to nature by 2030. And the delivery plan has been published. It was published in July this year by the new government. So people want to look at that. It's on DEFRA. Okay, next slide. So across England, there are 48 local nature recovery strategies. There are lots of references in those strategies to housing, nature and food. And the key principles are integrating biodiversity, wildlife corridors, sustainable design and bringing back redundant buildings into use. From our point of view, that's a big issue because we don't want to keep building, enormous housing estates all over green fields in Shropshire because we are a major producer of food here. So we're being asked to choose between food production and house building. Yet there are lots and lots of empty buildings that could be brought back into use. We here have got very interested in the use of SIL money. So that's Community Infrastructure Levy. So in our local authority, there's £12 million unspent SIL money, and we're quite interested in getting our hands on a bit of that to spend on green infrastructure rather than just seeing it as infrastructure. It's something our council hasn't considered in the past. So we're lobbying on that. We're interested in putting together town and parish clusters, and we're interested in carrying on with conferences and inspiring others to take action. Next slide, please. So I think it's down to people power. Develop more community land trusts in your town and parish councils. There is a national network. Shift power and ownership and control to communities. Create circular economies. Town and parish councils can facilitate action in communities and believe in people to do the right thing. Don't wait for politicians. This has got to come from people. So next slide. And some quotes on there. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read them out apart from the last one. We'll go down in history as the first society that wouldn't save itself because it wasn't cost effective. The wildfires in France and Spain must be costing an absolute fortune. Surely investing in nature recovery and climate action is cheaper than firefighting enormous fires, which are going to inevitably come all over Europe. Okay, that's the end. Well, I hope I cheered everybody up. Not depressed everybody.
Actually, both of you, Richard and Janet, thank you so much for something that I found absolutely fascinating, because it's just showing what a small organization can do as it grows and as it gets momentum rolling and you're pulling other people in. That's fantastic. And very encouraging to the rest of us to see what you've managed to do, and the fact that you've been so successful with fundraising.
I forgot to say that I'm a parish clerk as well in one of the small parishes in Shropshire, which was why I got interested in the SELT network.
Oh, it makes you wonder what you do in the afternoons, Janet.
Yeah.
And fantastic. So thank you both very much indeed. Now, do any people have any questions for either Richard or Janet, please? Yes, Tristan, off you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Janet whether there was a sort of ever disagreements between all those different bits of land you've acquired about what the best strategy is. But I think you sort of answered it by saying you follow the local nature recovery strategy. But the one in Hampshire is rather vague and leaves lots of room for different ideas about what to do. So do you find it easy to get a strategy which locks all those different parcels together?
Yes, we haven't at all come into conflict with the local nature recovery strategy here in Shropshire, but we've been working very closely with the local nature recovery strategy lead here. So Lynn Park has been working alongside us, and there hasn't been any. Do you want to chip in, Richard? Because we work to all the sites. So we act as an umbrella, the Middle Marches Community Land Trust Board, and we have developed management plans, or are developing management plans for each of the sites. So we're operating a sort of hub and spoke model.
Right. But I was just wondering if an ex-owner, for instance, if you work with somebody and take over the management of their land, I was thinking maybe that your strategy, but then he might say, well, that's not what I thought would happen. We've come across things where different people have different ideas about what's the most important thing.
In the case of the site where we've got a memorandum of understanding, it was because the owner had appointed a commercial forestry company to manage the woodland, and they did what they were good at. They managed it commercially, and in his mind, he had wanted community access and wildlife conservation to be part of the management of the woods. And it was because they weren't delivering that we got into conversation with them, with him. And I think that's our sort of role really, is to look at what people want and how that might be delivered, if we agree with the principles, of course. And neither Janet nor I remember to mention that we've also become an approved body for conservation covenants, which you may well have heard of. This is a way in which landowners can protect their interests, if you like, in land for conservation by agreeing to a covenant, which will also bind future landowners for at least 30 years and probably beyond that, for the land to be managed in a particular way for conservation in this case. But there are variations on this. You can do it for philanthropic purposes, or you can do it for things like biodiversity net gain and carbon offsetting. in our case, we would only be interested in the philanthropic aspect. And just as an example of that, although it's still in sort of, well, it hasn't even been discussed yet, a local resident unfortunately died recently. He had a meadow which he had managed for many years, got many orchids in it, so many that they were spreading into his garden and so on. And knowing that he was terminally ill, he was concerned that that meadow should be protected into the future. And his son and other children have agreed to talk to us about the possibility of a conservation covenant. It's early stages, it might come to nothing, but that would be one way in which they could protect their father's legacy of this good meadow. So, yeah, that's another aspect to or potential aspect to the CLT's work.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Now, somebody else did have their hand up and they put it down again. They've had second thoughts. Sue, I thought it might have been you. Do please go ahead.
It wasn't me, but I've always got questions. So as there was a gap, so fantastic. Wow, just bowled over with what you're doing. Couple of questions. So I'm in Battle in East Sussex. We have formed a network with our local parishes for climate and ecology. We haven't touched on creating corridors, but that's something that we could talk about. We're all keen. So I wondered which organisation you thought might be able to help us create to link up the land and the corridor, see what's missing. I don't know which organisation might be able to help us the best. I've got another question afterwards, but that was my first one.
So I'll go first, Richard.
Yeah.
So I'm also on the board of something called Restoring Shropshire's Verges project. So we started linkages with town and parish councils and creating of green corridors by looking at roadside verges. And Plant Life are a national charity who were also running a verge campaign, road verge campaign. The idea is to create, instead of roadside verges just being grass that's mown umpteen times a year, you look at restoring those roadside verges to long linear meadows. So you're managing them as meadows and putting back the flora that should be there. And that's spilt over into linking up with CPRE's Hedgerow Heroes. We're a very rural community. So we've got verges, roadside ditches and hedges that can create long linear linkages between town and parish councils, and then that's spilled over into the development of micro nurseries, growing oak trees from veteran oak trees. So it's spilled out into all sorts of different conversations. And we've just finished a project called the Three Parishes Project, which I can send you a link to. We've now extended that Three Parishes project to 6 parishes. And again, it's concentrated immediately on roadside verges, but again the conversations with those parishes have spilt over into, well, what can we do in our gardens? Can we put bird boxes up? Can we do a pond? Can we do a community nursery? And I can send you the beginnings of the 6 parish project. We've only just launched that though, but you can, from the 3 parishes project, you can see where it's going with the 6 parish project.
Yeah, thank you. We obviously, an urban area, I know your area quite well, but an urban area has different, and we do manage some of the our roadside verges, but they're obviously quite small. And my other question was, I took with my councillors, we talk about the Environment Act and the obligation of town and parish councils to whatever, I can't remember the wording, but basically look after biodiversity. And I got pushed back saying it was only desirable, and that that it was less of a priority. And I wondered where I need to go to come back and say, we really have to do this. I think one of you mentioned mentioned it in when you were talking about the must do as against desirable. And I've got a third question after that.
Okay. I think one of the key things you need to do is talk to your local nature recovery strategy person. And I think from memory, I think we have a duty, town and parish councils have a duty to increase biodiversity by 10%. So on any building sites that are taking place, the builders and I don't know whether it's the same in your place. We collect SIL money, community infrastructure levy money, or Section 106. From our point of view, SIL money is more important because we've got this big chunk of money now sitting in the local authority that was being saved for a relief road, which is no longer going ahead. So we're quite keen to get at least £1 million out of the local authority to spend on green infrastructure, which will again rocket boost the work that's already happening on the ground. And there might be opportunities in your local authorities to do the same, to do some detective work. Where's the money? Where's the support? So local nature recovery strategy, where are the pots of money that you could tap into? And we've also here in my village used preset money and small grants to organise village talks, village walks, and we've been able to fundraise on a tiny scale, but raise a few £100. And with that, we've been able to put up house martin boxes, barn owl boxes, and we got 3 owlets this year, which
wow.
I can send you the photograph, and which then inspired other people to take action in their gardens. So, small amounts of money can do lots of stuff. And we asked for like £3.50 per cake and a coffee at a talk in the village hall, and eventually we ended up with £300. And we're just about to restore the village, a patch of grass in the village centre to a wildflower meadow, and we've got the plant plugs to do that. So it's that sort of thing. So it's showing people what can actually be done, and it's only small steps, but a lot of small steps make a big difference,
I've just said that, as Janet said, the local nature recovery strategy is very important in this regard. You can refer to that and say, that's what it said, that's what it's been signed up for. And I forgot what I was going to say now, but I'll come back to it maybe.
It gives you the background. It gives you the legal background, doesn't it?
Yes. It's picking up on what Janet said in her thing, that it's people power. In the local area, there was lots of comments about the LNRS, which said, oh, well, it's all fine words, but who's going to deliver it? Well, unless we all get off our butts and do it, and the prime example of this, far better than I am. You actually get people involved and say, yes, we want to do this. That's what we've signed, has been signed off. We need to deliver this.
Thank you. Incidentally, at my local district, we're trying to get a 20% of SIL money, not 10. So whether we'll be allowed or not, who knows? But and my final question is conservation governance that Richard mentioned. Is there anywhere where these can be seen?
Yes, DEFRA. Just Google DEFRA, conservation covenants.
Right. Interesting, because we're
it would give you a list of the approved bodies as well, that you could go to if you wanted to create one.
No, we've got a piece of land. It's that is owned by our district council, and I'm encouraging it to come over to the parish in the devolution. And the main concern is the cost of tree surgeon work that might be required. And there keeps talking about a covenant, and as far as I'm concerned, if it's not a conservation covenant, then it's of no value anyway. So I didn't know that existed. So that's really helpful. Thank
So
you.
can I just go back to the SIL money
Oh yeah.
conversation? So here they allow 15% of SIL money to go to town and parish councils, but 85% is left in the local authority, and the £12 million is the 85% that's sitting in the local authority. We're also wanting to tackle the other money that's sitting in town and parish councils that's unspent because they don't know what to spend it on. Which is a nice position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah.
So understanding SIL money has become sort of a key activity again. Yeah,
I agree totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, both of you.
So
okay.
going back to your first question about who may be able to help you tying these things together, the Friends of the Earth do a map, which if you are a user, I can't remember if your users are parish online or not, but
We are.
right, so you can tie together the Friends of the Earth layers in there with wildlife corridors. So they show you where the nearest corridors are around you, and they also recommend where to go to increase the corridors or to enhance them. So you can use your own mapping area for Parish Online to show where you're going to put in the bits that will pull them all together. So it's very powerful stuff. So if you're looking through your parish layer, sorry, not the parish layers, but the layers in Parish Online, look for Friends of the Earth. And
Wow, I never heard of that one.
Well, there you go.
Thank you so much.
That's why
So
we have these
it's
sessions.
Parish Online, and that mine is East Sussex, and then there's a layer from Friends of the Earth.
Yes, there's two layers actually, but yes.
I should have mentioned there's a big project round here called Wheel to Wave, which is the link creating a corridor from the North Downs right down to Brighton, which I could tap in on again.
There you go. I think pulling all these people together is as exactly as Janet says, you're getting the people power to do the work because they haven't got the time or the interest up at national government levels.
Yeah.
So you've been very patient.
Thank you. I was just curious about the BNG side of things because I thought perhaps that was an opportunity if, for funding. If you put BNG credits on one site, does that mean you've got funds to then be able to buy the next piece of land as a sort of rollover type thing? Is that something you've considered?
Yes, we considered it, not very thoroughly, but we I don't say we fell out of our depth, but we weren't sure that we were ready to take on that. And there's still sort of a lot of changes within biodiversity net gain in terms of, change. I mean, for example, there was the recent reduction so that small developments no longer have to do BNG. So basically, I'm saying we didn't feel we were ready to take it on, and that it was still too unclear to us exactly what we would gain. Having said that, in Shropshire, the Shropshire Wildlife Trust has acquired a large area of land with the view to using BNG funding to improve it. And as was tried to intimate earlier, that seems to be the way in which the larger organisations are going, which is fine. That's great. They're doing their thing, we do ours. So.
Yeah, just to add to that, we've been on a couple of calls with DEFRA about conservation covenants, and most of the people on the call have been sort of ecology organisations who are very interested in BNG credits because there's a lot of money attached to BNG credits, but they're private organisations and they're acting as the linkers, the brokers between people who own land and BNG credits. So there's loads of information online about that, but it scared the hell out of me, to be honest.
I understand that.
Like, what? I can't. I haven't got time to get involved in this stuff as well. It's just mad.
It might be helpful to know then that to sidestep those brokerages, there are people like I am a trustee of Natural Cambridgeshire, who are the local nature partnership over here. and we're currently putting a site together to connect people that have land and the BNG credits, so that you don't have to go through the brokers.
Yes,
there might be something like that in your area that might be kicking off as well. So it might get easier, might get better.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be at some point, but we'll see what
hasn't
happens.
Helped, has it?
No. Just to go back to, I think it was Sue who talked about being an urban setting. So in one of our urban settings in Oswestry, they've started something called the D-Pave project. Have you heard of that? So that's come over from America. So D-paving is
deep paving.
D-pave, DE-PAVE. So D-Pave project is taking up surfaces that are not absorbing water and replacing them with surfaces that do absorb water. So that's leading to the creation of community gardens in towns, the planting of trees in towns, that sort of thing. So we've got this flooding problem because we've got everybody's drives tarmacked over for car parking, and it's trying to remove those surfaces to try and start collecting some of the rain. And the other thing we've got really interested in here is encouraging people to put water butts up to collect the rain. We're getting these sudden deluges, and then we have a month's worth of sunshine where we don't have any water anymore. So people need to start collecting the rain, and it all helps with mitigating against flooding. And it's the same with the verge, ditch, hedge stuff. It helps stop flooding off fields and helps stop soil erosion. So, yeah.
Thank you. Kirsten, you're back up again.
Just a quickie. If you look at water sensitive Cambridge, there is an organisation, a small charity over here, that is doing something similar to the de-paving you described. They're describing it as rainwater gardens, and they're putting slits in the curbstones along the side of roads with permission from highways, obviously, so that the water, where there's pooling of water in Cambridge in these circumstances you describe, it can run into what they then create as a deep planted area to absorb that water and have it get back into the aquifer. So
fantastic. Yeah.
Kirsten, could I ask, there's a couple of suggestions you've made which have been really helpful. If you could just slap the links into the chat, then they get into the knowledge base and people can find them in the future. So if you have a second to just do that, that would be wonderful.
I'll pop the water sensitive Cambridge one in. The BNG website hasn't launched yet, but I can forward that to you when it does, so that perhaps it can be added later.
Okay, and Janet, is there a website for D-Pave?
Yeah, there is. Can I just send you the information after, Graham?
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
then you can just circulate it.
As long as I get it, then I'll put it into the knowledge base and people are able to find it from thereafter.
Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. Well, are there any other questions that people have got? I'm looking at all those of you who've kept utterly silent and you think, how are you? So, no mentions. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been very fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And we will publish the recording and the presentations so that you can see everything up on the knowledge base and people can have a look at it later. Next week, for those of you who are really, really fascinated in this stuff, we're being told all about somebody who switched over to a composting toilet in her own home. And I think I'm hoping to find that very, very intriguing as well. So do please come back and join us next week. And I hope you all enjoy the sunshine. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great session.